The lobby of the Marquette Hotel gleamed like money. Marble floors, gold-veined and polished to a mirror, reflected crystal chandeliers that hung like captured constellations. A classical quartet played softly near the far wall, their music weaving through the murmur of expensive conversation. Hedge fund managers, venture capitalists, media moguls, the sort of people who treated billion-dollar deals like optional side quests. Nathan Cole stood at the edge of the crowd, watching his own reflection in the dark glass of the lobby doors. 42. Dark hair swept back with just enough silver at the temples to suggest distinguished rather than old. Custom navy suit, shoes imported from Italy, a watch that cost more than most starter homes. Billionaire. Tech visionary. Founder of Pulsar, the AI logistics platform that had revolutionized global shipping, according to the breathless headlines that still occasionally floated across his feeds. He adjusted his cufflinks and exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Tonight, he needed to be impressive. The Global Impact Summit always brought big players, but this year, there was someone special rumored to appear, someone even the loudest tycoon spoke about in low, careful tones. The Phantom CEO. That was what the blogs called her, though the name made Nathan smirk. She rarely appeared on panels, never gave interviews, and refused to attend flashy launches. Yet she'd quietly built Horizon Pathways into one of the most powerful conglomerates on the planet. Ports, logistics, supply chains, renewable energy, medical distribution, smart infrastructure, a quiet hand in everything. It was said that if she backed you, you could move mountains. It was also said that if you crossed her, you might as well pack your desk. Nathan didn't believe half the myths, but he believed one thing. Pulsar needed a major partner. They were growing fast, but the logistics industry was consolidating even faster. Every sizable company was scaling by acquiring, merging, swallowing competitors whole. He needed Horizon, or someone like them. The rumor was that Horizon CEO would be attending the summit for the first time in years. And Nathan fully intended to make a very good impression. He checked his phone. A notification flashed about Pulsar's stock price dipping a few points, then recovering. He swiped it away. Investors would panic at every twitch of chart if he let them. Tonight he'd charm the right people, reassure them with a single photo, a single quote about strategic partnerships. Then, the panic would morph into fawning confidence overnight. The glass doors slid open as another guest entered, sending a gust of cool night air through the lobby and ruffling his hair. Along with the chilly breeze came a woman. She stepped into the glossy light of the lobby with the slow, careful movements of someone whose knees had known too many winters. Her coat was an old wool thing, the kind that had once been black, but now faded toward charcoal at the seams. A knit hat hugged her head, gray curls peeking out, and she carried a canvas tote bag instead of a clutch or designer purse. Her skin was a deep, warm brown, creased at the edges with lines that looked carved by laughter and frowns alike. Her sneakers were worn, the soles thinned at the heel. Everything she wore said, "Not one of us." Nathan's gaze flicked over her automatically and dismissed her just as quickly. Not a donor, not a speaker, probably lost. She paused just inside the doorway, blinking at the sudden brightness, eyes scanning the room. Several people glanced at her, then glanced away with that practiced, polite invisibility that wealth learned early and never forgot. The concierge moved to intercept her, but was stopped by another guest with a flurry of whispered questions. The woman remained unbothered, as if she had all the time in the world. Her gaze settled on Nathan. She smiled. Nathan didn't smile back. He was busy imagining the faceless, powerful CEO of Horizon Pathways as someone tall, sleek, immaculately dressed. Certainly not an old woman in a faded coat. The woman started walking toward him anyway, the rubber soles of her sneakers squeaking softly against the marble. He felt a flicker of irritation. Great. Of all people, she'd picked him. "Excuse me, son," she said when she was a few steps from him. Her voice was low and warm, carrying the softness of the American South. "This the right place for the Global Impact Summit?" He had a sigh. "Yes, it is." Her eyes drifted to the crowd of glittering people beyond him. "A lot of fancy folks. That's one way to describe them, he said, glancing over her shoulder, already looking for his real targets. She continued, as if she hadn't noticed his impatience. They told me I could pick up my badge at the registration desk. Nathan fished for patience he didn't really have. Sure, he said, but the registration desk is for guests and speakers. This is a private event. Oh, I'm quite aware, she answered, reaching in her tote and pulling out a letter-sized envelope. It was slightly creased at the corner. She held it like it mattered. I got an invitation. He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Anyone could print a fake invitation nowadays. There were scams where people fake their way into high-end events all the time. I'm sure you do, he said, but the registration is over there. He pointed toward the cluster of staffers with tablets near the far wall. You might want to check with them. Thank you, she said, though my knees would appreciate if I didn't cross the whole room just to find out I'm in the wrong place. He gave a dry little laugh. That's unlikely. She tilted her head. You sound mighty sure about that. Look, he said, keeping his voice light to keep the edge out of it. This is the Global Impact Summit. Tickets cost more than several cars. People flew in from all over the world. And everyone here is on some list or another. I'm just saying, maybe this isn't what you're looking for. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment. They were an earthy dark brown, sharp, calm, and unsettlingly direct. And what makes you so sure, son? She asked. He gave her a smile that he usually reserved for reporters asking naive questions. Call it experience. She studied him like she might study a painting she wasn't sure she liked yet. Then she chuckled. Well, experience is a teacher, she said. Sometimes a cruel one. She held up the envelope. Mind if I trouble you to at least look? He really didn't have time for this. He also didn't want to be rude in front of potential partners watching from across the room. People noticed everything at these things. Who you brushed off, who you charmed, who you pretended not to see. Fine, he said, reaching for the envelope. Let's make this quick. The envelope bore the summit's embossed logo, but that wasn't anything special. Any talented printer could recreate it. He slid out the contents and unfolded the letter. Dear Ms. L. Harper, he skimmed further. We are honored to invite you as a keynote guest. His eyes moved a notch faster. In recognition of your leadership at Horizon Pathways. He stopped, a tiny hiccup in his breathing. That's nice stationery, he said lightly, buying himself a second. The woman, Ms. Harper, watched him with a faint smile. It is, isn't it? He scanned the rest of the letter, his brain suddenly sharper. The signatures matched the co-chairs' names. There was an RSVP code printed at the bottom. The watermark shimmered faintly when he angled it under the chandelier, just as it should. So not a fake. Or if it was an extremely good one. He folded the letter slowly. You said you haven't checked in yet? No, sir, she replied. Flew in this afternoon. Came straight from the airport. Didn't want to be late. He flicked his gaze toward her sneakers and tote. Clearly, he said before he could stop himself. Her eyebrows rose a millimeter. Come again. He gave a small laugh that didn't quite sound like one. Nothing. Just most people made a bit more of an effort. As in, he gestured vaguely at the sea of gowns and tuxedos behind him. Dress code. This is a black tie event. My. So many rules. She looked down at herself with an amused frown. I suppose my old coat and shoes don't quite fit in with the gold cufflinks. Look, he said, dropping his voice. I'm trying to help you, okay? The staff over there are very strict. If you walk up looking like this, they'll probably assume you're in the wrong place. It might be a little embarrassing. You don't say. I do say, he replied. This crowd can be unkind. Not everyone is as patient as I am. She laughed, a real, rich laugh this time. You keep telling yourself that, son. He bristled. I'm just being honest. And I appreciate honesty. She tucked the invitation back into the envelope and slipped it into her tote. But see, here's the thing. Where I come from, when folks say they're just being honest, it usually means they're just being rude with better PR. Someone nearby snickered. Nathan's face warmed. He hadn't realized they'd drawn an audience. A couple in evening were pretended to read the event program as they listened in, grinning. I'm not being rude, he said tightly. I'm trying to save you some dignity. And I've managed to keep mine for over 70 years now, she said quietly. Pretty sure I can handle a check-in desk. He exhaled through his nose, tamping down his temper. Suit yourself. Oh, I intend to, she said, smiling again. Before I go, maybe you can satisfy an old lady's curiosity. He checked his watch, then nodded at her to go on. Who are you? She asked. You carry yourself like you own the building. He straightened. Nathan Cole. No flicker of recognition. No widened eyes, no I've read about you. Just that same careful, patient attention. He added, founder and chairman of Pulsar. She looked up at the crystal chandeliers, then down at the scuff on the marble near her sneaker. Can't say I've heard of it. It's been in the news, he said. We're doing some things that matter. Doing some things, she repeated thoughtfully. Well, that narrows it down. This time the laughter from the onlookers was openly audible. Nathan's jaw tightened. You might want to keep that sense of humor handy, he said. You're going to need it in there. I always do. She dipped her head slightly like a small bow. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Cole. You have yourself a nice evening. She turned and walked toward the registration desk, her tote swinging at her side. He watched her go, annoyance prickling at his neck. That hadn't gone how it was supposed to. He'd intended to shoo her gently toward the exit, not be turned into some kind of punchline. Harsh, man, someone murmured behind him. He looked back to see a young founder he vaguely recognized from a panel last year staring after Ms. Harper with an unreadable expression. You realize she had an invitation, the founder said. Nathan shrugged. So do a lot of people. Doesn't mean they fit every room. The founder hesitated. Yeah, but it's not really our call who fits, is it? Nathan didn't answer, because he was watching something that made his stomach twist. At the registration desk, the staffer scanned Ms. Harper's code. The screen lit up, and the young man's posture changed. He straightened, smiled so wide it looked painful, and quickly reached under the table. He set an elegant black box on the counter, opened it, and withdrew a sleek metal badge attached to a lanyard. Not the standard badge all guests wore. A different one, marked with 3 gold stripes. VIP speaker. The staffer draped it around Ms. Harper's neck with a nervous little bow. Another staffer rushed over with a tablet and gestured toward a clipboard, eyes wide, nodding deferentially. Nathan's annoyance cooled into something heavier. That didn't mean anything. Some donors got special treatment. Or maybe she was a last-minute addition. Still, the staffer hurried around the desk, offering to escort her personally. As they walked toward the main hall, a few people near the entrance glanced up, their eyebrows lifting as they saw her badge. Definitely a speaker, someone nearby murmured. Wonder who she is. Nathan pulled his own badge from inside his jacket. It was heavy and impressive, marked with a single gold stripe. He looked back once more at Ms. Harper's retreating figure. 3 stripes. He forced a laugh, shook his shoulders loose. Whatever. Some niche philanthropy segment, probably. An activist they'd invited for color and inspiration. The schedule had a voices from the frontline session. That had to be it. He would be polite if their paths crossed again. That was enough. He had bigger things to worry about. The summit unfolded in escalating waves of performance. On stage, world leaders spoke about climate goals with careful sincerity. Nonprofit directors told stories of villages transformed, clinics saved, lives rescued by innovations sponsored by companies in the room. Wealthy donors smiled, clapped, nodded at the right moments. Nathan spent most of the evening in the orbit of people who mattered to him. Investors, infrastructure ministers, heads of major shipping lines. He delivered small bursts of practice charm, slipping in references to Pulsar's growth metrics, pilot projects, case studies. The platform reduced idle port time by 40% on average, he told a European logistics director, handing over a card. We modeled optimal routing under extreme weather conditions, he told a climate official, and prevented supply disruptions during their last hurricane season. He knew his numbers, his charts, his talking points. He was good at this. Still, in the gaps between conversations, his gaze kept drifting almost against his will. Ms. Harper was hard to miss, but easy to overlook if you weren't really looking. She sat through panels with her hands folded, sometimes tapping one finger against the armrest in time with the speaker's rhetoric. She smiled at the ushers, spoke quietly with the volunteers. She took no selfies, asked for no photographs. But everywhere she went, staffers' radios buzzed a little louder. At one point, Nathan saw the Minister of Trade from Kenya break away from a cluster of executives to greet her with a warm hug. A Port Authority director from Brazil came over too, embracing her respectfully. A researcher from an African health NGO nearly tripped over their own feet to shake her hand. She'd introduced herself as nobody. Yet the people who actually moved things in the world seemed to know her very well. Twice their eyes met across a sea of suited shoulders. She gave him a little nod of acknowledgement. Not triumphant, not smug, just present. He pretended not to see. The twist hit him halfway through dessert. They were seated in the grand ballroom now, servers gliding between tables with practiced choreography. Soft light bathed the room in warm amber, flattering everyone equally. The program for the evening lay beside each plate, printed on thick cardstock. Keynote address. Invisible hands, visible impact. Speaker, Lila Harper, CEO, Horizon Pathways. Nathan stared at the program as though the letters might rearrange themselves if he glared hard enough. They really landed her, murmured the investor seated to his right. Impressive. I thought she never left her headquarters. Shows how much influence the summit's board has, said someone else at the table. Or how much they begged. I heard she makes ministers wait weeks for a 15-minute call. I heard she's buying up half the ports in Southeast Asia. I heard. Nathan tuned them out. The name was a simple L. Harper. Nothing more. Ms. Harper. L. Harper. No, it could be a coincidence. Harper wasn't that rare a name. But as the lights dimmed and the MC walked on stage, holding the wireless mic with professional ease, Nathan's certainty unraveled. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC said, our next speaker needs little introduction, though she has consistently refused most of them. The room chuckled. I'll be brief, because she asked us not to spend 5 minutes listing her achievements when she could spend those minutes talking about people who impress her. Our keynote tonight is the CEO of Horizon Pathways, a company that has quietly revolutionized infrastructure and connectivity in over 40 countries. Applause. She built it from a regional trucking firm into a global force in logistics, renewable energy, medical distribution, and smart infrastructure, all while insisting on profit sharing with local communities and transparent labor practices. More applause. Louder now. She is proof that you can change the world without burning it down. Please welcome Lila Harper. The lights tracked to the side entrance of the stage. The old woman in the faded coat, though now, Nathan noticed with a jolt, she'd taken the coat off to reveal a simple but well-tailored navy dress, walked toward the podium. The crowd surged to its feet in a standing ovation. Nathan rose slowly, his chair scraping faintly against the floor, heart thudding in his ears. He had mocked her, told her she didn't belong, warned her she wouldn't fit in this room. Across the table, a venture capitalist whispered, "That's her? I didn't think she'd be so." He didn't finish, but the thought hung there. Old, black, unpolished. And yet, as she reached the podium, the room fell silent with a kind of focused, reverent anticipation that not even heads of state had commanded earlier. She adjusted the mic, smiled at the crowd. "Good evening, y'all," she said, the southern drawl rolling out gentle and unhurried. "I'm told I'm supposed to start with a joke." Laughter rippled through the room. "So here's one," she continued. "They put keynote speaker on my badge and still looked at me funny when I walked in." The laughter was louder this time, tinged with recognition. Nathan shifted in his seat. "I want to talk to you tonight," she said, "about invisible hands and visible impact. And I don't mean the ghost of some economist." More chuckles. "As a girl, I used to watch my mama's hands," she said. She'd wake before dawn to clean other people's houses, scrub floors that were never meant for her to walk on for any reason but work. Her hands were strong, capable, invisible. No one knew her name. But those hands kept a lot of households from falling apart. Her voice wrapped around the room like a story told on a porch. As my world got bigger, I came to see more invisible hands. Dock workers unloading ships, nurses in crowded clinics, Truck drivers stuck at borders because some system somewhere decided their paperwork wasn't formatted right. The more invisible the work, the more visible the consequences when it fails. Nathan found himself leaning in despite himself. Now, some of y'all, she said, sweeping the room with her eyes, are very used to being the visible ones. Names on the awards, faces on the magazine covers. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with visibility. Use it well, it can shine a light on what matters. Use it poorly. Well, most of you have seen what that looks like on the news. A murmur, a few wry smiles. But here's what I've learned. She placed her hands gently on the sides of the podium. The people who can do the most good are the ones willing to notice who's missing from the picture, who's standing just outside the frame, holding the whole thing up. Nathan's cheeks burned, remembering his first assessment of her, standing just inside the lobby doors in her worn coat and sneakers. Someone at his table whispered, "She flew coach into a storm last year to personally negotiate a port reopening after those floods. Can you imagine any of us doing that?" Her speech wove stories of truck drivers in Mexico, solar engineers in Nigeria, dock workers in Malaysia. The specifics were vivid, practical, grounded, cutting through the abstract, glossy language that filled most summits like this. "You want impact?" she asked. "Start by listening to the people who don't look like they belong in your boardroom. Odds are, they're the ones doing work that keeps your world from falling apart." At that, Nathan flinched. He wondered if she was thinking of him, if she remembered their conversation at all, or if he was just a brief annoyance before the main event. "If you walk into a room like this one," she continued, "and assume you know who matters based on whose suit costs the most, then you are missing opportunities that no algorithm can catch." Her eyes flicked across the crowd, and for a second, just one, Nathan could swear she looked directly at him. It felt like being seen and weighed at the same time. "Don't tell me about your disruptive technology," she said, her tone soft but unyielding. "Show me whose lives are less precarious, because you exist." The room erupted in applause when she finished. Not the polite, rhythmic kind that speakers get by default, but something deeper, longer. People stood, clapped until their hands hurt, some whistling, some shouting her name. As the ovation swelled, Nathan sat very still, his heart thudding. Around him, people turned to each other, buzzing with admiration. "She's incredible. No wonder Horizon is everywhere. I would kill for a meeting with her." Nathan swallowed. He needed that meeting more than any of them. But now, reaching for it meant facing the memory of his own arrogance in the lobby. The casual cruelty disguised as courtesy. He could pretend it hadn't happened. She met so many people, maybe even a blur. Yet something told him she'd remember, and that she wouldn't forget easily. After the speech, a reception was announced in one of the side lounges. Guests flowed out of the ballroom like a tide of silk and wool, grabbing cocktails and tiny desserts as they went. Nathan lingered near the back, trapped in a net of congratulatory small talk. "You look troubled," observed Mira, an investor he'd known for years. "Stock that bad?" He forced a smile. "Stock is fine." "Then what?" He hesitated. Mira was sharp enough to sense weakness, but pragmatic enough not to exploit it without reason. "I made an idiot of myself earlier," he said under his breath. "With Harper." Her eyebrows shot up. "You met her?" "In the lobby." He braced himself for ridicule. "I thought she was lost. Or crashing the event. I told her she'd be more comfortable elsewhere." Mira stared at him, then covered her mouth and actually wheezed with laughter. "You did not." He winced. It wasn't as bad as that. She gave him a look. "It was worse. I can tell." "Oh, Nathan." He glared. "Thank you for your compassion. I mean, what did you expect? The CEO of Horizon to show up in a cape with spotlights and a drum roll." "She was unassuming," he said defensively. "Unassuming," Mira repeated. "You mean she looked like someone you could ignore without consequences?" He snapped, a little louder than he meant to. "Everyone judges in these rooms. You know that." "Sure," she said. "But not everyone gets a chance to find out how wrong they were 10 minutes later." He folded his arms, temper and shame at war inside him. "Point taken." She softened. "Look, you can either spend the rest of the night beating yourself up, or you could do something about it." "Like what?" he muttered. "March up and say, 'Hi, remember when I basically told you to leave?'" Anyway, please invest in my company? Maybe not exactly like that, she said dryly. Start with an apology. A real one. Don't try to pivot it into a pitch in the same breath. She'll smell that from a mile away. He glanced toward the lounge entrance. She's going to be flooded with people. Probably, Mira said. But someone like her has a sharp filter. If you're honest, she'll either cut you down or respect you for it. Either way, you'll know. He hesitated, then downed the rest of his champagne in one gulp. All right, he said. If I don't come back, tell my board I died trying. I'll tell them you died learning what humility feels like, she replied sweetly. The lounge was already crowded when he entered. Ms. Harper, no. He corrected himself. Ms. Lila Harper stood near a corner, a glass of water in one hand, her badge still hanging from her neck. A small semicircle of people surrounded her, firing off questions and compliments. The way you structured the port partnership in Ghana, how did you convince? Heard you turned down an entire sovereign fund because we have a project I'd love to tell you about. It's in the early. He hovered at the edge of the group, waiting for an opening. She answered questions calmly, sometimes redirecting them. We can talk numbers later, she told the banker. Right now, I'm more interested in which of your loans actually reach the folks you showcase in your glossy brochure. Nathan flinched on the banker's behalf. Excuse me, came a voice at his elbow. He turned to see one of the summit organizers. Mr. Cole? Ms. Harper was actually hoping to speak to you specifically. If you have a moment. Nathan blinked. She was what? Come with me. The organizer led him through the crowd, murmuring polite apologies to each person he edged past, until Nathan stood within arm's reach of her. Up close, she seemed even smaller and older than she had on stage. A few stray threads clung to the sleeve of her dress. There was the faint smell of peppermint about her, like the candies grandmothers carried in their purses. Yet her presence filled the space, quiet but immense. Mr. Cole, she said, her eyes creasing at the corners. We meet again. Every clever line he'd ever used deserted him. Ah, yes, he said. We do. She gestured to a small, sitting area nearby. Walk with me, if you don't mind. My feet are in open rebellion. The people around her stepped back respectfully as she moved away, like a tide parting. Nathan followed, acutely aware of several curious gazes tracking them. They settled into two chairs by a window that overlooked the city. The lights below glittered like fallen stars scattered over pavement and steel. So, she said, folding her hands in her lap, you figured out who I am now. Yes, he said quietly. I have. And he swallowed. And I owe you an apology. Her eyebrows lifted. For what exactly? He forced himself not to look away. For how I treated you in the lobby, he said. I made assumptions based on how you were dressed. I spoke down to you. I tried to protect you from embarrassment when the only embarrassing thing happening was me. A corner of her mouth tugged up. That's a start. I was rude, he continued. I dressed it up as concern, but it was arrogance. I'm sorry. She studied him for a long moment, eyes searching his face like she was reading a complicated contract. Do you know how many rooms I've walked into, she said slowly, where people saw nothing but an old black woman who didn't belong? I can imagine, he said. I doubt you can, she corrected gently, because if you could, you might not have done it yourself. He winced. Fair, she sighed, leaning back a little. I've been mistaken for staff, for a driver, for security's grandmother. Folks have handed me their empty coffee cups to throw away while they spoke to the white man standing behind me, who happened to be my junior analyst. I've had people ask me if I was someone's plus one or lost or here to set up. And then, minutes later, they're tripping over their tongues when they realize they need something from me. He felt heat crawl up his neck. I deserve to be in that list. Yes, she said simply. You do. From anyone else, the bluntness might have felt like an attack. From her, it felt like a diagnosis. Clinical, accurate, not unkind. He cleared his throat. I know an apology doesn't undo the moment. No, it doesn't, she agreed. But I'm old enough to know the difference between someone who's sorry they did a thing and someone who's sorry they got caught doing it. I'm both, he admitted. She barked out a laugh at that. Honest again. I like that about you. It's messy, but it's honest. He met her eyes. I'm sorry I did it, he said. And I'm not just apologizing because I later found out you're the most powerful person in the building. I'd like to think I'd be ashamed of myself regardless. Would you? She asked. Or would you have gone home thinking, that poor woman? At least I tried to save her from embarrassment. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Probably that, he admitted. There it is, she said. That little voice that tells you you're always the hero in your own story. Dangerous thing, that voice. People have built empires on it and toppled countries. He nodded slowly. I've spent most of my career being praised for my instincts. It's uncomfortable, realizing some of them might be rotten. Uncomfortable is where growth happens, she said. Comfort is where excuses set up house. They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, she tilted her head. Tell me about Pulsar. The sudden shift in topic jolted him. You've heard of it? He asked. I hadn't. Until you told me your name, she said. Then I had one of my team send me a quick summary. She tapped her ear where a tiny earpiece nestled, partially hidden by her curls. You're in a lot of headlines. Venture darling. Efficiency wizard. The usual titles. He resisted the urge to sit up straighter. We've built a platform that uses predictive algorithms to optimize global shipping routes, warehousing, and inventory. We reduce waste, cut fuel consumption, improve delivery times. She said, an amused glint in her eyes. That's the deck you use to charm investors, isn't it? He paused, then allowed himself a rueful smile. More or less. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Now tell me the part you don't put on slides. He hesitated. The part where optimizing routes also means deciding which ports get bypassed because they're too inefficient, she added. Which towns dry up because they're no longer on the path of commerce. Which workers are replaced by automation without adequate retraining. That part. He exhaled. We try to account for those variables. We consult with local governments, run impact assessments. And how many of those assessments were done by people who grew up in the communities impacted rather than in glass towers? She asked calmly. He had no good answer. We're trying to do better, he said weakly. I don't doubt that, she replied. But intention without humility is just ego dressed up in a nicer outfit. He blinked. You're saying our tech, my tech, could be doing harm I don't even see. I'm saying, she said, that every tool is dangerous if the people wielding it believe they're above scrutiny. Her gaze softened. You have something powerful in your hands, Mr. Cole. You can help reroute entire economies. But the same arrogance that made you tell me I didn't belong in that lobby will make you tell a whole city it doesn't belong on the supply chain if you're not careful. He swallowed. That's harsh. But true, she pressed. He thought about the small towns in the Midwest they'd deprioritized in favor of major hubs. The fishing villages in Southeast Asia they had deemed economically unviable in one of their pilot models. He'd seen the numbers. He hadn't seen the faces. Maybe, he said quietly. She nodded. I don't need you to beat your chest and cry about it. I need you to decide what kind of man you want to be with that much power. The world has enough clever men. What it lacks is men who know how to admit they've been wrong and then change course. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Are you always this direct? Time's the one thing money can't buy back, she said. I don't waste it coating truth in sugar. He laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. You'd be terrible in PR. Oh, I hire people for that. They win awards while I cause trouble. There was a pause, then he took a risk. Ms. Harper, he said, I came tonight hoping to meet you. Well, not knowing it was you exactly, but hoping to meet the CEO of Horizon. Pulsar is at a crossroads. We can either become a tool that makes rich supply chains richer, or we can do something that actually retracts the distances that hurt the most vulnerable. We need partners who understand the second path. She watched him, her expression unreadable. You understand, he pressed on, the real world of ports and trucks and people. My team understands algorithms and interfaces. I think those worlds need each other. I think we could do something important together. Speak carefully now, son, she said. You're treading close to turning an apology into a pitch. Remember what your investor friend told you. He blinked. You overheard that. I see more than people think I do, she answered. Comes with living as an invisible hand for so long. I developed eyes in the back of my head. He flushed. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for breathing, she said. You've already said sorry for the right things. Now I want to see what you do with that. He hesitated. Meaning I've been watching your company longer than you've been watching mine, she said. We'd already started due diligence on Pulsar. I wanted to see if the man at the top matched the marketing slide deck. He stared. You what? She smiled, slow and sly. You think I just wander into summits hoping to stumble on promising investments? Child, I was born at night, but not last night. So this was, he struggled for words. A test. Oh no, she said, shaking her head. Our test started months ago. Analyst reports, pilot results, local feedback. I already know what your product can do. Tonight, I wanted to know what you can do when you realize you've gotten it very wrong about somebody. And, he asked, his heart hammering. And you walked into this conversation, she said. You owed me an apology, but you still could have dodged me all night or thrown some spin on it. Instead, you named what you did. That tells me you can at least see when you're standing on the wrong side of the line. He let out a breath, dizzy with a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. Does that mean? It means, she interrupted, that Horizon is still interested in exploring a partnership. But if we move forward, there'll be conditions. Anything, he said quickly. Careful, she warned. You don't even know them yet. I'm listening, he said. First, she began, holding up a finger. Any joint venture we create will have an independent oversight council made up of people from the communities impacted. Not just mayors and ministers. Dock workers, truckers, clinic nurses. They get real veto power over projects that reshape their lives. His strategist brain flared with objections. That's unusually democratic, he managed. You mean messy, she said. Yes, it will be. Can you handle messy? He thought of board meetings where efficiency was treated like a religion. I can try. Second, she continued, your metrics of success have to change. No more bragging about reduced delivery times without tracking how many small businesses folded because they couldn't keep up with the new regime. If we speed something up over here, I want us accountable for what breaks over there. He nodded slowly. We would need new data channels, new KPIs. Third, she said, cutting in, you personally spend time in at least 3 of the communities our pilot projects will touch. Not for ribbon cuttings. For listening. I'll come along if my doctor says my knees can survive a few more flights. You learn to see the people behind your dashboards. A strange emotion twisted in his chest. Something like fear and something like excitement. I can do that, he said quietly. You can start, she corrected. We'll see if you keep going. He smiled faintly. You really don't believe in easy approvals. Easy approvals are how we got into half the messes we're in, she said. Now, one more condition. And this one's more personal. He straightened. Okay. Next time you see an old woman at a fancy door, she said, meeting his eyes squarely, you ask her if she needs a seat or a drink of water. You don't assume she doesn't belong. You don't assume she can't pay the ticket. And you sure as heck don't make it sound like you're doing her a favor by judging her. His throat felt tight. I promise, he said. Her gaze softened again. Good. Because let me tell you something, Mr. Cole. One day, if you're lucky, you'll be the old man walking into rooms where people look through you. You'll know then what a difference it makes when someone sees you. He exhaled, a small, shaky laugh escaping him. I suppose that's true. Now, she said, pushing herself to her feet with a soft grunt. Enough lecturing. I have half a room of eager folks waiting to tell me about their moonshot projects. He stood as well. Thank you for giving me the time. You didn't have to. I didn't, she agreed. But I've seen enough arrogant men in my life to know some of them are still salvageable. He chuckled. Am I one of them? We'll see, she said, her eyes twinkling. The jury's still out. As she turned to leave, he blurted, Ms. Harper? She glanced back. If Horizon does partner with Pulsar, he said, I'd like to build those oversight councils into our core model. Not just for our joint projects. For all of them. It might hurt our bottom line for a while. But if we're really about impact, we should act like it. She studied him for a beat. That right there, she said softly, is the first real thing you've said about your company all night. He smiled, surprised by how light he suddenly felt. Then I'll try to keep the hits coming. Do that, she said. Now go enjoy the tiny desserts before some hedge fund manager eats them all. Word traveled fast. By the next morning, a rumor was circulating among the more plugged-in attendees. Horizon Pathways was in talks with Pulsar for a groundbreaking partnership. Nobody knew details. That didn't stop speculation from blooming like invasive ivy. At breakfast, Nathan opened his inbox to find it overflowing with messages. His assistant had flagged the most important ones. His board chair asking what was happening, a major investor requesting a call, a minister from a coastal nation curious about the potential collaboration. He responded to none of them right away. Instead, he searched for a specific thread, the one from his team proposing a new round of efficiency recommendations that would shut down several smaller warehouses in favor of one megahub. He'd approved it in principle before flying out. He read their projections now with fresh eyes. Projected cost savings, outstanding. Projected job losses, a line item. Projected impact on local economies, 2 vague paragraphs. There, in the white space between bullet points, he saw invisible hands letting go of invisible lives. He hit reply all. We need to revisit this, he wrote. Not just from a cost perspective. I want a community impact assessment with real input from workers. We may need to accept less efficiency if the trade-off is gutting entire towns. He hovered over send, feeling the familiar tug of his old instincts. Profit, growth, shareholder comfort. He pressed the button anyway. The knot in his chest loosened a fraction. Later that afternoon, he stood in a sunlit conference room with a small group of summit attendees invited for a private session with Ms. Harper. Some were leaders of small NGOs. Some were heads of city transit systems. A few were other tech founders like him. She spoke less and listened more in that room. When a woman from a coastal village described how a new shipping route had brought both jobs and pollution, Ms. Harper didn't offer platitudes. She asked what support they needed, then turned to the tech founders in the room. Any of your models account for this? She asked. They shuffled, scribbled notes. Nathan raised his hand. Our current ones don't, he said, but they will. Consider this an open request. I want input from all of you on what our metrics should include. If we're measuring the wrong things, we're optimizing the wrong outcomes. She nodded slowly. Now that, she murmured, is the sound of someone starting to understand. After the session, as people filed out, she caught his eye. Walk with me, she said again. They strolled down a quiet corridor lined with photographs of past summit speakers, presidents, celebrities, Nobel laureates. Do you know the funniest part of yesterday? She asked. I'm almost afraid to ask, he said. When I stepped into that lobby in my old coat, she said I was nervous. He blinked. You? Nervous? I'm a human being, not a myth, she said dryly. I hate these things sometimes. The cameras, the expectations. I left my fancy outfit in the garment bag because I thought if I walk in looking like a queen of something, they'll treat me like an idea instead of a person. So I put on my comfortable shoes and my old coat and thought maybe I could pass, blend in a little. He looked at her, startled. You were trying not to stand out. And the universe said, she laughed. Because what happened? The very thing I was trying to avoid grabbed me by the collar. The stares, the doubts, the assumptions. He grimaced. Starting with mine. Starting with yours, she agreed. But here's the twist in the story, Mr. Cole. I spent most of my life fighting to be seen. And now that I'm visible, I sometimes wish I could disappear again. Meanwhile, you spent most of your life expecting to be seen. You forgot what it's like to risk being invisible. He frowned, digesting that. So what we do with that? We remember, she said. I remember the girl watching her mama's hands. You remember the man who got it wrong in the lobby and chose to face it. Then we both remember the people who don't get a keynote or a badge or a second chance when someone misjudges them. He nodded. At the end of the hallway, a glass door opened to a terrace overlooking the harbor. Cranes moved in slow, graceful arcs above docked ships. Trucks crawled like ants along the narrow roads. There's your kingdom, she said, nodding toward the port. All the data streams in the world, and it still comes down to steel and concrete and people hauling things from one place to another. Sometimes I forget that, he admitted. On my dashboards, everything is neat. Nodes and connections. No potholes. No angry unions. No tired drivers. Dashboards are like those mirrors in hotel lobbies, she said. They're polished and flattering and only show you what's in front of them. Real life is all the messy stuff happening just outside the frame. He laughed. You really don't like glossy illusions, do you? Glossy illusions led a man to tell me I didn't belong in a room where my name was printed on half the contracts, she said. So no, I don't like them. He swallowed. I'm going to be paying for that line for a long time, aren't I? You're going to be using it, she corrected. Every time you walk into a room, you'll remember how easy it is to be wrong. That's not a punishment. That's a gift. A painful one. The best ones are. They stood in silence, watching the harbor. He found himself saying, almost to himself, I used to think being a billionaire meant I'd finally be done learning hard lessons. That I'd arrived, I guess. Crossed some finish line. She snorted. Son, there is no finish line. Just different levels of the same test. What's the test? He asked. Whether you're willing to see the people you used to look through, she said. Whether you'll change your story when you realize you're not the hero in someone else's. He thought of his earlier reflection in the glass doors, how he'd admired the controlled power of his own image. Now, in the terrace window, he saw a different man standing beside a small, older woman in a simple dress. The lines on his face looked sharper, his confidence less polished and more real. I'll try not to fail it, he said softly. She patted his arm. You will fail it. We all do. Just promise me you'll notice when you do, and try again. I can promise that, he said. Good. She turned back toward the conference center. Now let's go see if your fancy algorithms can handle a little real-world chaos. I have a dock worker in Ghana who would love to tell you what your last pilot missed. He smiled, feeling the twist of fear and anticipation again, but this time he welcomed it. Lead the way, Ms. Harper, he said. I'll bring a notebook. You bring your ears, she replied. The notebook can come later. Months later, the story of Horizon and Pulsar's partnership would make headlines. Journalists would write about the unprecedented oversight councils, the contentious meetings where dock workers vetoed proposed routes that looked perfect on paper but disastrous in practice. Investors would grumble about slower returns, then grudgingly admit the model's long-term resilience. Panels would be held. Award would be given. The word innovative would be used so much it would lose all meaning. But the story no reporter ever quite captured was the one that began in a hotel lobby under the glitter of chandeliers. A billionaire had looked at an old black woman and seen irrelevance. He tried to save her from a room she owned. He'd mocked what he didn't understand and dressed it up as kindness. He'd failed the test that no amount of money could buy his way past. And then, when the truth stepped on stage and the whole room rose to its feet, he'd had a choice. Hide from it, or walk toward it with his hands open. In the end, it wasn't the billions or the algorithms that changed the course of his company or his life. It was the memory of her walking in with worn sneakers and a faded coat, and the quiet voice in his head that now whispered every time he entered a new room. Look again. Who are you not seeing? And somewhere, in an office stacked with reports and photographs and mugs of peppermint tea, Lila Harper would occasionally smile when a memo crossed her desk that used phrases like community veto and worker-led redesign. That boy just might make something of himself yet, she'd mutter. Then she'd pick up her pen with those same hands that had once scrubbed someone else's floors and sign off on another project, another partnership, another chance to make invisible work visible. Because in her story, she was never the surprise twist. She was the quiet, steady line running all the way through. The real twist was that the billionaire, the one who thought he'd arrived, was only just finding his beginning.